Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. I am with Jason Johnston Yellen and Jane Bowie, and we are at the Potter James Distillery inside what is currently a construction zone.
It is.
Very much so.
Man, oh man, Shevitz, does it look like it's coming together? Like before we started talking, you were explaining the pipes going through everything and wanting them all straight and not too many bends. And we said, okay, hold on, let's stop talking and let's try to get as much of this on wax as possible. So Jane, it would be awesome. First of all, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Oh my gosh, are you kidding?
It's great coming here, right? Because last year, I think it was season 8, episode 3, you were talking about this dream coming together. You got your $50 million loan. I didn't want to say that too loud.
It's a big chunk of change. It used to be a big chunk of change.
I can't pay back $1 million. What's the difference at this point?
But what was a dream and things are coming together, it's actually, you could physically stand inside and the heat is on, which is really nice.
We closed it up about a month ago, so that was a game changer, yeah.
So, take us through us. Take our listeners through this tour.
And your listeners are welcome. I'll give my email at the end, and if they want to reach out and come visit, we would love that.
Brilliant.
We're not offering tours on the norm, but we're doing appointments, and people are reaching out, so we love it.
Wow.
But, so we designed this distillery. We call it a shotgun approach. And it's really logical, combined. Denny and I have 45 years in the industry, so we've seen a lot of things that work great, and then we've seen things that you would change if you could. But the truth is, when you're building a distillery in the 1800s, you don't necessarily think about the same things. But we've designed it for everything to flow in one direction. And the purpose of that was really from a quality perspective, to your point, right? The less 45s and 90s you have in your pipes, the less places for mash to get stuck and breed bacterial contaminations. So it just makes sense from a quality perspective for everything to run straight. So we're currently standing on one end, which we call our powerhouse. It's the boiler room. So you've got a 500 horsepower natural gas superior boiler. You've got an air compressor, and then everything feeds from here. So this is going to power the entire thing. We've got cooling tower with chill water outside that we can actually use. So, we took an extra 4 months to design every drain, the concrete when you go up to the fermentation room, right? Couldn't be too smooth for safety hazards, but it couldn't be too rough so you could spray out if mash gets on the floor. But because of that, we've actually only had one change order in the whole project. Oh. So it's been like a lot of measuring, not just twice, as my grandmother would say. We measured like 2 million times. And then, but yeah, and you still miss things, but it's been really fun and rewarding, but we're ready to start making whiskey. So should we walk through?
Okay.
Yeah.
Ask questions when you got them. 2 areas you can never, in my experience and Denny's experience, build big enough are maintenance and quality. And the truth is, those are the 2 departments that probably are kind of the unsung heroes of a distillery. Nothing works without a great maintenance team. Yeah. But then none of it matters without a great quality team. Sure. So this is actually the maintenance shop. It's pretty good size. So we'll be able to have all of our parts. We'll have a crew of 4 total in maintenance and engineering. This is our CIP room. So we'll be able to actually bring all the chemicals from outside. They'll never come into the distillery. We'll be able to mix everything to actually clean from here and pipe it out. So that room is completely self-contained, and you don't have to.
I was observing the brickwork around that.
Yeah.
What's CIP?
Yeah, famously in the last interview, you and Denny with the acronyms.
Cleaning in place. So it's how you clean everything.
Okay.
So you're bringing in, and I'm sorry, the chemicals escape me, and this is where we need Denny. Apologies, he's in a construction meeting.
The details.
But so you're bringing in chemicals to basically mix into a solution to clean out your cookers, to clean your fermenters, to clean your still. Caustic.
Like that,
Thank you. How?
I don't know where I pulled that from, Jane. Boom,
I'll be honest,
there it was.
I'm exhausted. I don't know what to tell. So that there's a few things like Denny gets a twinkle in his eye about, and this is one of them.
Cleaning in place.
Well, just being able to have a self-contained room that you're not bringing bags in, no one's it's just in that room coming from outside. Like that was a big deal.
I would never have spent a second thinking about such a thing.
This is another one he's super proud of.
As we walk through a couple of closed doors.
This is our electric room. So one of the things that took extra time, we actually went ahead with our electrician team and did where it went for everything. So we were able to put conduit in slab. So you don't have wires. Everything's actually in slab already. Our IT closet, which has its own HVAC, which is huge because the IT closet at Maker's Mark sat in Rob Samuels' office. And so we would have to go in his office to reboot the system. It would always be on an important call and it was just humiliating.
Okay, wandering through another section. Oh gosh, look at this.
This is our maintenance manager's office. His name's Mike Monroe. He and Denny actually started the exact same month, January of 1998 at Jim Beam.
Oh, wow.
He was in maintenance and Denny was in quality. So he's we're very lucky to have him. He's quite the veteran in our industry. This is our only kind of non-operational space. So originally our design had a visitor center that was going to sit out front. It was going to look like a farmhouse. And I'll tell you as we go through and talk about design, we didn't start with an architectural design. We started with a process design. So the first day we sat down with our architects, we said, this is how we want the distillery to run. This is where we want everything. But then we started thinking about lighting needs and different things, and they actually built the architectural design out of the operation, if that makes sense.
That's wild.
It seems logical, but they were like, no one's really ever done it that way before. And they did a beautiful job of making this place beautiful, but we designed the distillery with our employees as the first customer and the visitors as the second customer.
Yep.
So anyway, when the budget came back, we're like, oh, the visitor center probably has to go for now. So that got killed, and that had offices, tasting rooms, gift shop, that kind of thing. So they said, okay, this space is free. So this will be our front door. We'll have a little porch out here. You can see our first two rick houses.
Yeah, drove in past them.
Yep.
Right?
The eventual visitor road will cut in front of that. So the road you came in will be back of the house. That road was $1.4 million, so we decided that could wait as well. So this will be a bar. Denny and I actually don't have offices in the distillery, so we will sit here most days. We'll have a skee ball machine.
Yes.
We mentioned that in the last year.
I was hoping you were serious.
A little lounge, and then you've just got some bathrooms. And we've really leaned into the distillery's very serious, and it looks like a distillery, right? The rest of the spaces, there's lots of weird color, and we had fun.
Nice.
We feel like whiskey should be fun. There's women's and then men's. So
I like the height that I've seen so far coming through here. Like even as we stand here, what will be the welcoming section? Like there's two sets of windows, one above the other.
Yeah.
Like this is great height too. Even your doors are very tall.
Yeah.
Like, was that an 8-foot door to walk through?
Maybe, yeah. That sounds right.
I'm only 6'2", but I still appreciate an 8-foot door.
And we actually, you can see, we're going to have repeating lights, bulbs, like globes that hang down. So it's going to add to the height to give that feel. So there'll be a lot of cool lights in here. So that part's ended up being fun, but the design stuff we did not enjoy in the beginning. We kind of looked at the architects and we're like, isn't this your job? Like, why are we telling you what it should look like? But it's been fun. So tour path would come here.
Okay. Off through some plastic sheeting into somewhere.
So, elevator, which
ADA compliant.
the biggest argument Denny and I've had recently, he wants to slow down the elevator so he can play an entire song for someone, almost like Guardians of the Galaxy, where there's like different, it's like, ooh, I got the, Bruce Springsteen, Born to Run. What ride did you get? Like, and I'm like, it takes me 15 seconds to walk up the stairs. What the fuck are you talking about? Like,
What if you want to hear a song? Go to the elevator.
and so I'm like, let's just get the still ready. Why are we talking about elevator music?
He really is a details guy.
Oh my God. So I think eventually we're going to do some sort of storytelling through here, whether it's graffiti or murals or something fun. Someone smarter and more creative than us will figure that out.
Gotcha. But I like the way you're thinking about so much of this distillery as blank space. Like, how can we use this to communicate to people who come to see us?
Yeah.
I really like
And part of it is, we know who we are clearly, but we still aren't completely sure who Potter Jane's going to be.
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
So,
Oh my gosh.
the big thing for us as whiskey nerds, we wanted everything to be in one space. That was a really big deal for us. And we wanted to have easy access to the whiskey in every part.
Yeah.
So that this was extremely intentional for us. I'm going to take you guys to the side rooms and then we'll walk through if that works.
Okay. Yeah, I love this.
So this is our break room. The thing about distilleries is employees don't really get breaks, right? Like, you take lunch when you can, you take a break when you can.
Yes. Yeah.
I haven't worked in a distillery day in, day out, but even the time I spent, in the distillery with the team at Makers, when it's July and August, you're just miserable. So having a space they can come, they can still have full visibility into the operation.
Yeah.
We'll have TV screens that give quick data of here's what's happening, but we don't have a control room. There's no, it's HMIs in the plant. We've designed it to be very hands-on.
HMIs?
I don't know what it stands for, the computer system.
Okay. Computer system.
This is designed, you'll love this. It's kind of going to look like a Scottish pub. I've got tartan wallpaper. We've got a booth coming here. We'll have tables, chairs, kitchen. But it's just a nice space for the team to have, to be able to come, get out of the plant for a minute, sit down, have lunch, whatever they need. So,
and it sounds like space with personality, not just four white walls.
Well,
and an
it doesn't make sense. And they're like, what kind of environment do you love? I'm like, I like pubs. And they're like, great.
Yeah, right.
That's wild.
So that was literally the conversation.
Wow.
And so,
so the old adage about you don't really want your employees to be comfortable in a space because you want them to get back to work.
I don't believe in that.
You sound like you've inverted that.
Denny and I feel like you're asking people to spend a minimum of 40 hours a week away from their family, away from, our employees all farm. They all have other things, You want it to be nice for people.
I love that.
And that was one of the things when we started talking about this, and again, the budget came back doubled, and you just think, you can build the greatest distillery in the world, and if you hire shitty people, none of it fucking matters. It's people. People make everything.
Yeah.
It's why I love Disney, so special. But those employees, you're like, how are you this happy to work here? Right? That's what you remember.
Yeah.
And so...
To you both. That's awesome.
So this is all employee space. So we have the full team already hired. We have 19 employees, including the two of us.
Okay.
This wood.
I know. It's gorgeous. Really nice looking.
So we said, can't build maintenance big enough. You can't build your quality lab big enough either.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So
Is this a sensory room?
this is our QC lab. So this will be where we do all of our tasting. It'll be where we run all of our analytics. It'll be where we keep retained. So you can see there are no windows in the back. The back wall will be retained samples. You don't want natural light on those. And then one of the things we did, quality wasn't always such a big thing traditionally in distilling, right? I feel like it's still kind of a modern.
Sure.
And a lot of times quality has to fight their way in or bother everybody. They're kind of the police of a distillery is how I think of it. But it's such an important part, and really every department should be owning quality individually. So one of the things we did, all the department heads, managers' offices are in the quality lab. So they all work out of here now.
Nice.
So instead of being like, hey, I need you to come in or go to taste panel or hey, you need to be engaged with quality, we're forcing them to be.
They're right here.
They're right here.
How much of quality control or insurance is managing consistency?
I think it depends on your brand. And I think managing consistency from a quality perspective is different than managing consistency from a taste perspective.
Okay.
I think big brands, I'm always amazed, whether you love it or hate it, I think Budweiser is a remarkable brand that they can produce that beer.
Yeah.
And the Budweiser I have in Singapore, I taste the same as the one I have down at the watering hole in my town, right? And I think that you get to scale, people expect that. I think what I'm excited about coming from where I've been, we don't have to be consistent on taste all the time.
Yeah.
That might be where we end up, when
that's where Makers was. I feel Makers
I lived it every day.
Right, yeah.
And you want that. It's a 3 million case brand.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Again, when I'm in London, I want the Makers to taste the same. But I think you maybe don't have the same expectations. For example, the releases we did on wood finishing, they were meant to be different, but the quality standard needed to be consistent.
Yes.
Right? Same thing you guys probably do with your bottling.
Absolutely. That's what I was just thinking.
So it's exciting. I mean, it's terrifying, right? For me, I can't speak for Denny. I came into a strong brand that had a strong DNA. It had impeccable credentials. All I had to do was be a great shepherd for it, right?
Yeah.
This is building out of scratch.
Yeah.
I'm trusting we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And please come visit us and buy our stuff. But it's crazy.
Not for exact specifications, but what kind of size are we standing in here? Because this seems like
it's gigantic.
A large quality control room.
It's gigantic. And again, you'll be shocked how fast you grow into it. But it is massive.
Yeah.
But one of the things we wanted was to never outgrow it and have to take it out of the distillery. We definitely gave it a lot of square footage.
It's like buying your kids shoes that are too big.
Yeah.
You want them to grow into.
Yep.
There you go.
So these will all be basically bench tops where you can eventually have equipment. You've got glass washer, traditional washer. These will be, again, same thing, more of the analytics. We're not going to have a lot out of the gate. The budget just doesn't allow. We got really spoiled. So we'll do, the standard testing things we need to look at. But honestly, we're going to lead with sensory. And I think, luckily, we have enough combined experience, not just Denny and I, but even our team. If we smell something off, we know where to go look, right? We understand. So, again, we'll grow into it, but, eventually I can't wait till we can buy a GC and mass spec and HPLC and do all the geeky analytics. But
So it was actually one of the questions I wanted to bring to you today. So when we talked previously and it was over Zoom and plans were afoot, the talk there was, we hope that once we're up and running, we'll move towards bringing these things in. And I'm curious, as you continue to go through this build, and this is looking very, very real as we stand here today, how close do you think you are to bringing in those machines that make your job that little bit easier?
It depends on how fast you guys buy our whiskey.
The challenge to the listener.
I think it is. It's all budget, right? And I think for us, we got a great education on how to think long term and big picture. So we have a 20-year master plan. Now, is it going to look exactly like that?
Yeah.
Of course it's not. But I think I am not naturally a patient person, but I've learned this industry forces you to be patient.
Sure.
If you're going to be good, you got to be patient. And I think so for us, do I want an HPLC to look at wood extractives to parts per million? Fuck yeah, I do. Is that a must-have to make great whiskey? It's not, right? So I think it's a balance. So, same, we talked about the visitor center. I want it badly, but we'll earn it over time. And it's not mission critical to putting the best whiskey we can out the door.
Yeah.
So
Denny had also talked the last time about sending out samples.
we will do that for sure.
And so is that local to your county? Is that within Kentucky?
There will be places in Kentucky, but then there's labs all over the country that are renowned for certain compounds. But we'll do, EC testing in-house. There will be certain things we look at here that you just need to have. You'll do acids, you'll do sugar testing, some of the basics that you need. Okay. But those are not the same as like, $500,000 piece of equipment.
You're here with the chemistry set.
We got super spoiled. Yeah.
Just really quickly for our listeners, when you hear HPLC,
high pressure liquid chromatography,
and all the other acronyms, just go back to season 8, episode 3, where all of that is.
I'm sorry.
Described. No. It's good.
I need to talk so much.
No.
Sometimes my rule is like, if my grandmother doesn't know what you're talking about, then you're being too fancy. But yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the process. So granary. Most of the granary's outside. And actually, it's been really interesting. The granary's as, if not more complicated than the rest of the entire distillery. Like, it is a major operation in and of itself.
Okay.
So we are going to be making rye bourbon and wheated bourbon and then a little bit of rye whiskey. So trucks will come in. You saw we have a covered building where we can actually do grain testing where they're not having to be out in the elements. We'll have underground conveyance into these vertical bins that are a new system. The first time I'd seen one was at the Fred B. No Distillery at Jim Beam, which is a really cool distillery if you've never been there. And we have a roller mill beneath. We're actually going to play around with grist size. So our entire distillery has really been about optimizing flavor at every touch point. And really having different levers to pull, not to be weird, just for flavor. I mean, it's if you can build it in, learn how to do it where you're getting what you want or you're maximizing. So grist size is something we're going to look at.
Interesting.
So the roller mill kind of gives you more flexibility with that. It's also quieter, which is nice. You're standing in the grain tower. Milled grains, we have milled grain bins on the far end, and then we're going to convey into these scale hoppers. I'll be honest, everybody tried to talk us out of scale hoppers. So there's probably 2 or 3 things in this distillery that we did just because we fucking like it. And the scale hopper's one.
Okay.
I just don't think there's anything sexier than a scale hopper, personally.
So what's a scale hopper?
You literally weigh out. It's like baking. It's like weights and measurements. So you're weighing out the grain versus normally you can just push and you can weigh it as it conveys straight in. This was something they did at Makers, and I loved. It's just one of the most charming parts of the whole operation to me personally, and Denny felt the same. So you actually weigh out the grains, and then you have a slide gate where the people physically have to drop the grains. So they weigh it out on the computer, right? Okay, I've got my corn, I've got my pre-malt. But then they physically have to go over, pull it, drop it. So one of the things we wanted to do is have people interaction through the process, and there's a couple of reasons. One, mentally they're more engaged in what's happening. So you can catch things. By the time it gets to the analytics, it's too late.
Yeah.
You're done, right? So having someone walk up and go, oh, this isn't fermenting right? You can catch things early if they're engaged in the process. 2, 8 hours goes by real slow if you're pushing buttons on a computer all day. So by having it be active, it actually makes the day go faster.
There you go. Makes sense.
So we'll weigh out the grains. We have 2 10,000-gallon cookers. We actually didn't need the second cooker, and we went ahead and did it for a couple of reasons. One, we're going to cool the mash down in the cooker itself versus using a mash cooler. So normally you would drop tub and then go to a mash cooler to get it over to fermentation to cool it down. The thing about a mash cooler, it's great technology, but if you're not running 24/7, it's a contamination hotbed. So again, we didn't want unnecessary travel. So the thought was cool it in the mash tub and then send it to the fermenter. And you're seeing more distilleries kind of going to that, depending on philosophy. This also allows us to do more traditional fermentation set temperatures. So you got to think pre-cooling coil technology in the fermenter. The reason people were running thinner mashes and all the things is they didn't have the technology to keep it cool. Once that technology came along, it's fantastic, but people started doing hotter sets and lower holds on a temperature scale. Well, again, you've kind of narrowed the field. So we want to play around with lower fermentation set temperatures, you're not stressing the yeast out as much, and then letting the yeast develop and the ferment develop more slowly. The thing is, we're only going to run at about 50% of our capacity on purpose. We're not trying to set the world on fire. So for us, we don't have to eke out every single drop of alcohol and worry about throughput and yield the same way. Do those things matter? Of course they do. But we can afford to go a little slower and let the flavor develop that way. Is this too much information?
No, this is perfect. And actually, Josh and I had a follow-up coming down the road today. We were talking about, last time on, you were talking about cooling coils. And when Josh and I had the interview with you, we were thinking condensing vapor cooling coils. And it was only in returning to the interview, it was fermentation cooling coils.
You can see them.
Can you talk us through that? We've talked about cooling jackets before.
So,
this is a worm tub from our famous worm tub episode.
And then we only did in the bottom half so that it allows us to do half ferments, because our cooker's 10,000 gallons, which is about 25 barrels. Our fermenters are 20,000 gallons, which is about 50 barrels. So it's 2 cooks to 1 ferment. But rye, for example, foams, right? So you could actually just do 1 cook to a ferment. Again, we've built in extra capacity. So, or if you want to do experimental or weird stuff, you're not having to make 50 whole barrels of it.
Are cooling coils more prominent here in the U.S.?
I don't know anyone that doesn't. The makers, Cypress fermenters, don't have them. But no, so when I started at Makers, we didn't use coil-in coils. And then we eventually went to it because, again, if you don't set it right and it reaches a certain heat level, it's going to funk out, and then bacteria starts to sit in. Which you can tell I'm not a distiller. I don't mind a little bit of bacteria. I think it's flavor. I always think of Highland Park, which is one of my favorite distilleries in the world. But a distiller's like, you say bacteria, it's a 4-letter word, right? So,
Okay.
So from the cook to the ferment, talk quickly about design. So one of the things we noticed about when we were doing our field trip Fridays is this distillery feels high energy, or this distillery kind of feels low energy, or what are we noticing? And natural light, we realized you want natural light because it makes you feel better, right?
Yeah.
But then when you have windows, and I think it's beautiful, and kudos to people who do that, somebody's got to clean that shit. Right? And then you're getting so much heat. So we asked for lots of windows. So the farmhouse, this looks like a barn. It wasn't an intentional thing. It actually came about because we asked for certain lighting, and then we asked to be able to move air through because we wanted to use open fermentation. One, from a quality perspective, you can see. Two, again, we just like it.
Yeah.
I love being able to see fermentation.
Yeah.
Denny's the same. So they built this monitor that goes up in the middle where we'll have fans, and then we have louvers on the windows, so you'll be able to pull the air through and up. We have the same thing below. So it really, again, we won't know till we're running in the dead of summer, but it shouldn't get too terribly uncomfortable in here.
You're mentioning it looking like a barn. From me standing in looking out, it feels a bit like being inside a rick house. The same kind of size of window, the same height of window, and the number of windows all down the side.
I forget, it's 200 and something windows in this building.
Gosh.
Yeah. And they all open, which I love.
And you'll clean those every Friday? Denny will do them every second
we
Friday?
actually went ahead and just made that Denny's permanent
Yeah, that
chore.
checks out.
That, and he replaces all the toilet paper in the bathroom. The cemetery, it kind of looks a little like Angel's Envy, I think. And beautiful distillery, obviously they're historic, old in that building, so you don't get that. But we liked the cemetery, how everything. One of the things we thought about, though, and I hope it's okay. I don't think anybody would be offended I'm mentioning other distilleries, but Wilderness Trail has this staircase straight down to the bottom of their fermenters in the distillery, if you've ever been there. And we're like, that's really smart, right? So we said we would love where the team doesn't have to go all the way back down to get under to work on something or look at a pump or change something. And so we said, we want a staircase. So our architects were like, let's make it a grand staircase.
It is grand. That was
But
the
what's
exact
funny,
word I was going to use.
Visitors will not use this. This is employees only, which is hilarious. I mean, you might take your pictures or something, but
I could imagine this lined with Christmas trees in December.
We'll add that to Denny's list.
Denny in a tux coming up and down here during shift.
He's going to get all of his new job description from this episode.
I'll be like,
fantastic.
you need to write down your KPIs
from. Only 16 Christmas trees, not 18, not 14.
The concrete floor was a different choice because a lot of people use grating or wood.
I was going to ask you this.
I think it's beautiful, but I'm biased, you know. And then we've got drains, but every other, so you can see the hoses, so you'll be able, and you can see it slopes slightly. This will eventually be just cable wire, so.
You got to be careful on this construction edge.
Yes.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, I'd always heard that the grating was because the vapors would need a way to fall towards the ground below.
I think.
Do you have enough movement going on that you're not so worried about that?
Not worried. I think people like grating for that. I think it's easier to clean. Everything falls.
Yep.
It's less expensive. We were both like, we don't want to walk on grating all day. Like, I don't think, no judgment on anybody, but it was just a personal choice. And we do have grating in our cistern room. Beer well. So it's slightly bigger. It's 25,000 gallons.
What was it again?
Your beer well.
Beer well.
You go from the fermenter to the beer well. It's just a holdover between the fermenter and the still.
Okay.
36-inch copper column still. All the indoor equipment is Vendome. We wanted it to be open where you could see it in its entirety, but we wanted it to be away from kind of windows. So it's tucked in this it's got its own little cubby. And then we actually built this platform on top. So our maintenance team didn't have to use man lifts all the time to work on the beer heater in the top of the still. So there's staircases that go up, or a ship's ladder that goes up, and they have a whole platform where they can just keep their tools. It's not super dangerous, and they can go up and work on it whenever they need to. Vendome is so funny. So normally you have a roof hatch to drop the still in. It's very dramatic. It's so cool. Denny was really upset we weren't going to have one because it's just really neat if you've ever seen them drop in a still. this thing. We invited. It was so embarrassing. So we're like, our still's going in. I don't know if you've seen this video. Our still's going in. Let's have a taco truck and beer and invite our friends. And so our friends and family came thinking it was going to be like this. It took 4 hours because they had to like wheel it in. And then it was like the friends like pivot. And then they had to hoist it. So they brought it in and laid it down and then they hoisted it up. Well, we didn't really know what was happening. They're like 2-3 meetings before, they asked us, do you want to buy an electric hoist for the still installation? We're like, well, how much is it? And they told us, and it wasn't cheap. We said, well, would we use it for anything else? They're like, not really. We're like, oh, manual's fine. Well, we're not fucking doing the work. These poor guys. It's like a 6-person team. They hand hoisted this whole still up.
Oh my God.
And they would take it and shit. They'd be like, I only got 2 more pulls, and then a guy would jump. It was, and Denny's like, I'm an asshole. I'm like, totally. You're a total asshole. So it was, and then, so people hung out for 4 hours. It gets up, and then they're like, when are you cutting the plastic off? We're like, we're not cutting the plastic off. Why would we cut the plastic off till we need to use it?
Yeah, to show the shiny thing.
So it was very, it was a fail, according to our friends and family.
A 4-hour fail.
They got tackles and beer out of it. How much of a fail is that?
Thank you. But yeah, so, 36-inch column, all copper, and then our fubbler. Denny's not here.
Fubbler. I usually a doubler or a thumper, but a fubbler.
We had Vindome build us a hybrid.
There you go. Okay. Can we talk about that?
I don't know because Denny says no. But I think fuck it. So you know, doubler makers. He ran a thumper at Bernheim.
Yep.
And so when we had our first meeting with Mike Sherman at Vindome, he's like, you guys gonna go doubler or Denny? I know you love a thumper. Mm-hmm. And so we were like, well, what's the flavor difference?
Yeah.
And Mike's like, I don't know because people have one or the other. You don't really have an apples to apples comparison.
Yeah.
So we said, well, it'd be interesting. And he said, well, why don't we design you one that can do both? That you can actually study the differences and really. So they're excited to have the learnings. We're excited because it's just fun. And then, you know, love of Scotch. We wanted a gooseneck to play around with reflux a little bit.
There you go. Okay.
Now that thing may be a disaster and it comes off, but we'll see. But we thought it would be fun to be able to look at mouthfeel a little with that.
I love that.
For the listener, can you give us a very bare bones thumper, doubler?
It's the same process. It's just the mechanics of it. So a doubler is you're essentially redistilling. So the vapor's coming off the beer column. You're turning it back into a liquid. So that's where you have your low wine coming off anywhere from probably around 120 proof. You then take it into the doubler, and it's essentially a continuous running pot still. And I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but and you're just going to redistill it.
Yeah.
What the thumper does is it bypasses the condenser off of the beer column, and you put water at the bottom to a certain level in the actual tank in the still.
Yeah.
So it uses its own energy. You take the vapor straight in, and when it hits the water, it quickly redistills it and takes it back out. So the reason they call it a thumper is when you get it started up and before it gets to equilibrium, it makes this thumping noise.
There you go.
Yeah, so you're essentially more energy efficient. So honestly, if there's no flavor difference, we probably would just run it as a thumper.
Yeah.
Because you're not having to you're not having to condense it back down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
that's very cool.
Yeah.
That was a pristine explanation.
Really?
That was beautiful.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm sure Denny will have
lost in the weeds. You were just like, boom, 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 done.
Awesome.
I think our listeners right now are nodding their heads, understanding something for the first time.
This was meant to be just a walkway. again, so the team didn't have to go all the way around. And they made it a bridge. I think it's one of the coolest parts of the whole distillery, this bridge. Yeah, and then I love that you can see all the tanks underneath. Again, the maintenance shop's right there. So everybody has easy access to everything.
Yeah.
Again, it's a super simple distillery.
Simple, straightforward, straight lines. Before we walk away from this area, what's the little doodad on the wall?
That's just our tail box.
A tail box?
It's just our spirit safe.
Okay, I was going to ask you if it was the safe.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it's fashionable for people to have really creative. Again, didn't seem like a necessary spend at this moment in time. So this is just kind of their standard off the shelf one they do. I love it. Yeah. So you literally can, I'm not tall enough to do this, so I gotta have this.
Oh, I got
but you'll be able to taste the distillate.
There you go.
Yeah. So just super simple.
Yeah. Well, given the spirit safes you see in Scotland, this does seem really modern and innovative and interesting.
Comparatively speaking,
it's just a tail. Yeah, and like people do, people have really fun ones. Like, you know, the Angel's Envy's like the angel wings, if you've been there, and people have, they're often like branded, or someone has one where a guy's like rolling a barrel. It's like a whole copper setup, and then it's yeah, we weren't creative enough, so we were like, we'll just whatever you got.
That's a tradition.
Yeah, but putting this thing on the mezzanine was a real pain in the ass.
The thumper doubler.
Yeah, normally they're in the basement because you're just using gravity to go back down.
Yeah.
And because when we started talking about what Vendome was creating for us, our architect was like, it'd be a shame to like not show people that. So this was not an easy task. You can see our low wine tailbox is way up there.
Oh, yes. There you go.
So we're trying to figure out now, like a permanent, how do you get up and taste off of that?
Hire really tall people.
Another ship's ladder?
Yeah. Well, so this is empty. We've already built in, so if we ever need a second distillation set, it's ready to go.
You see the equipment to go in.
All we would have to do, everything else is scaled to expand. All we would have to do is take down this wall and add 10 more fermenters and 1 cooker, and we're done.
Gotcha.
So, sometimes I say it and I'm like, we're such assholes. Like, well, we're clearly going to expand someday. I really hope that's like my daughter's problem. She's 8. But
are you using the 10 fermenters from the beginning?
Yes.
Both sides of this will be used.
The bottleneck is our still.
Yep.
So funny is when distilleries start adding capacity to certain areas, your bottleneck changes all the time.
Right.
It's super interesting. Yeah.
Well, the time we did a walkthrough with Denny at Bernheim?
Yeah, Bernheim.
They were installing the new column still there that was giving them their third, and it must have been 3 feet from wall to wall.
I actually think they do a 60-inch, it's like 5 foot diameter.
Massive, 5 foot. Yep.
Yeah.
It was ginormous.
Yeah, they're massive.
Installed right when we were there.
And I mean, we debated a lot. I think 36 felt big enough to do some capacity, but small enough to have some agility.
Yep. 36.
So this is. Denny's like, we should put couches and hang out here. I was like, we're not going to put couches and watch people work. How's it going over there?
Sipping lattes. Yeah.
Drop some. All machines are going.
We might make this. We're going to see how loud and what the temperature feels like in this room. This is the spare kind of doubler room.
This is the mirror of the doubler.
Okay.
But this would be a cool place to do tastings or.
For sure. Yeah, with the window, looking out at all the fermenters.
And, I mean, you guys are getting a lot of information, but honestly, we're going to be like a 5-minute tour. So the tasting's the best part anyway. And then straight through to cistern. So we have 4 day tanks. So each tank can hold about 150 barrels, which if we were running 24 hours, that would be a day's production. We're starting out 5 days, 2 shifts. So Yeah. And then we have barrel filling over here. I'll show you in a minute. But
so these are the tanks to hold the spirit
Yeah.
for the filling.
Yep.
Got it.
So again, straight through, right?
Yep. Yep.
And this is our slop facility, essentially. So, you've got 9% alcohol, and the rest is water, grains. So we've set up our Busick Construction's built this whole distillery, and they've done a lot of distillery projects, and this is what they're most proud of at our whole distillery. They have built, because you've learned through the years, right?
Yeah, right.
It's all gravity fed. You have thick stillage tanks, thin stillage tanks. We're going to work with farmers in the beginning for cattle feed. So, and then barrel filling. We have a 2-head filler, so empty barrels will come in on the left, roll through. We'll have to, I'll be honest, those laser etchers and things were amazing, not in the budget. So we'll be hand stenciling barrels here, filling, and then kick straight onto a truck, straight out to the warehouse. So you can see where the drain is for that. And we're going to start with 110 entry proof, and then I think we'll play around with entry proof as we get into process.
Why the 110?
I am partial. Part of it's coming from Makers, and that's what we did. But then, I don't know if you guys remember, we did an 8-year study on it at Makers Market. And a lot of the flavors we love in whiskey are more soluble in water. Particularly wood sugars.
Sure.
So you actually get more wood sugars out of the barrel at a lower entry proof than you do a higher entry proof.
Right.
Tannins are also more soluble. So there's the bad with the good. Not that tannins are terrible, right? Obviously you want them for structure, but they also can start to beat the shit out of the whiskey at some point. So again, everybody's like, what's your whiskey going to taste like? I have no idea. Right? I can't give you specific. I can tell you what we visualize in our minds. I can tell you, when we really got serious about this, we sat down. I don't know if we talked about this on your last podcast, but it was like real talk. The shelf's crowded, right?
Yes.
The shelf is crowded.
Yeah.
If we don't have an actual point of view, shut the fuck up and stay where you are.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Because it wasn't like we hated our jobs. And I think what our point of view became was, as the industry's grown, there aren't as many people making the bourbons that remind us of why we fell in love with bourbon to begin with.
Yeah.
And I don't mean 40s and 50s. I mean early 2000s. There's just been a lot of process change. And so for us, it was we want to make bourbon that reminds us of why we're here. And that feels very self-serving and whatever. But there's a lot of geeky things that 99% of people probably won't care about, but for us, it matters.
I love that. Listening back to our conversation from last year, it was clear you're bourbon lovers who want to. You're not just building a business to make a chunk of cash. You're building a business to create something that reminded you why you got into whiskey in the first place.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best place to start creating a product. It's why we do what we do. We select the casks that remind us why we fell in love with whiskey in the first
We
place. And that's what
definitely
we
did
wanted.
not make a chunk of cash.
We didn't make
I guarantee you that. I guarantee you.
I mean, we've realized we are not. We're whiskey entrepreneurs, I guess, but we are not entrepreneurs. I love this, but it's been hard. And anybody who acts like it's not, a fucking liar. And rewarding, but I mean, I'd be lying if I said there aren't days we look at each other and go, why did we do this? But it's well, too late now. Just keep going. And I think it's going to be great. I think the construction's been, this part's been 2.5 years of design. They've actually gone really fast. This time last year, there were footers in the ground. So this thing's come up pretty quickly, but we're ready for the next phase. We're ready to start making the whiskey, which is slightly harder than probably building it. And then the real hard part comes when you got to go sell it. You guys know.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard.
It's hard. It's not easy.
It's that crowded shelf again.
Yeah.
Right? You're right back there.
Yeah.
And it is. It's just that. What's your point of difference? How are you going to earn your space on that shelf?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm curious on your perspective. Obviously, you know bourbon inside out and back to front. You've been in it for, a couple of decades at this point.
Almost, yeah.
Right? Like, obviously, we're hearing this in the industry right now. There's a slowdown. There's a change in the consumer. You're building this distillery.
Yeah. You're impressed with our impeccable timing.
Right?
That's what I mean.
and I'm curious for you, what are you seeing up close and personal? Because you're still pressing ahead. You're still going to make this. How do you chart a course, given how we're currently talking about bourbon?
So we talk about this almost every day. We probably give too much attention to it. And I think there's a balance of like, you listen to the noise enough to be informed. But for us, it's heads down and you stay on the path.
Yeah.
Because to your point, we're not doing this to sell out in 5 years. Like, not that there's anything wrong with that. And if someone came and offered us a big chunk of money, if you're listening, William Grant or whoever. I'm just joking.
Not that you would sell.
No, but I think it's like, again, it's a marathon.
Yeah.
So is it crazy? Yes, but to your point, I've been doing this 18 years. Denny's now been in for 27 years.
Yeah.
We've seen not necessarily this moment in time, but we've definitely seen ups and downs, just like you all have in Scotch, right?
Yeah.
Scotch is going through some of the same pain right now. But I think, so for us, I think it's a little bit of, you have to have your own belief system of like, we have a right to be here. We're going to do things the right way. We're going to stay on course. We're going to work our asses off. And we feel like there's going to be probably brands that die. There's going to be things that are weeded out. We feel like we'll still be standing in 10 years. Like, we believe that.
Yeah.
I'm curious, obviously, for me, born and raised in Scotland, the 60s, the 80s are times people talk about. When it comes to bourbon, you're born and raised Kentucky.
Yep.
You've lived that. You've had that around you. What's the general tenor in Kentucky about the boom and what comes next, or the rise and what comes next? Because I feel like there's a pragmatic people living in Kentucky.
I can't speak for everyone, but I feel like when you read what people are writing, the different things, it's like there's nothing to compare it to. So the 70s is when everyone talks about the glut.
Yeah.
And I think it was Chuck Cowdery just wrote an article about this, and he was like, this isn't that.
Yeah.
Bourbon, when you look back at the history, and I'm going to botch this, and I think Michael Veach once talked about, there was always something that got in bourbon's way, whether it was prohibition, whether it was a war, whether it it was always like one step forward, 2 steps back, or 2 steps, whatever, right? And this isn't that. Like, the spirit's the most popular it's ever been from a global standpoint. You do have more options. Think about this. How many distilleries do you have in Scotland now?
140 there.
Right. When I started 18 years ago, there were 9 bourbon distilleries in Kentucky. So we're still in our infancy in a lot of ways, I think. I don't believe people are just going to stop drinking whiskey.
Yeah.
You don't have a podcast that gives a shit about beer density if people are going to stop drinking whiskey. I think it's interesting. I think there's a lot to learn. I think there's going to be a bit of Darwinism of like...
Sure.
Yeah. Do you still believe there's a new consumer out there?
Absolutely. I think we've not scratched the surface.
Yeah, that's the part I'm starting to turn my focus to is, it's easy to see, obviously, bourbon bros, a term was coined, bourbons went up in price, allocations, the secondary market. I feel like there was a whole thing happened.
It's like the 1% though, right?
Right, that wasn't necessarily bourbon writ large.
Yeah.
And I think the same is true for Scotch. And I want us to get back to focusing on the producers and what's going out and how do you build a brand and what's in the bottle and how do you visit and what do you see?
And how do you make yourself more accessible? Because to that point, I think it can be quite intimidating. It's probably how I felt about when I first started drinking wine. Mm-hmm. And I always talk about, you go to a wine tasting and I left with really bad self-esteem. Like, right? I was like, well, I don't understand any of this. It's like, and I think it is, how do you make it more accessible, more fun, less intimidating? And I think what is interesting though, because, my husband works in the industry, but on the hospitality side. He runs everything non-operational at Jim Beam.
Yeah.
Tourism in Kentucky, not missing a beat.
There you go.
So that's an interesting part of like, people are still coming and it's shocking. I still meet people. I was in DC last week and I was at Jack Rose Saloon. I was going to meet with Bill Thomas to...
He's in Kentucky more than he's at Jack Rose.
I love that man, and I'm always like, tell me 7 things to taste right now. I actually will talk after I tasted some really interesting scotches.
Nice.
But, I met someone at this whiskey bar that was like, the Bourbon Trail, huh? Never heard of that. And you realize, like, to quote Bill Samuels, a lot of times we're just talking to ourselves down here.
Yep.
So
Into the choir.
I'm typically an optimist and silver lining person. I know I don't sound like it maybe, but so for me, it's like, is it scary? Sure. Is there anything I can do about it? No.
Yeah.
We just got to do what we do and hope it appeals to people.
Yeah. No, and we're right there with you. That's why we're standing here with you today in the beginnings of a distillery, being excited with you about the future. I think the consumers are still there.
I agree. I think it was just the last 5 years have been kooky.
Yeah. Oh, and that was, we talked about this a lot as well. Any entity who thought pandemic numbers were here to stay or to be built upon was out of their mind. You had to understand there was going to be a correction. That's Jess's word for us within the podcast. Like, there had to be a correction. We're seeing a correction.
Yes.
Does bourbon become more affordable? How brilliant would that be?
Well, and
Does Scotch become more affordable? Also brilliant.
And I know you guys, it sounds like, feel how Denny and I do. I'm consumer first. Yes, this is my livelihood, so that hat may change for me over the coming years, but I've always considered myself a consumer first, a producer second. And so for me, if I'm being really honest, I'm a little excited about what's happening because I do think the consumer's not been losing necessarily, but like, I don't think whiskey has to break the bank. Like, I don't think you have to take out a mortgage. Like,
exactly.
So I'm excited because I think quality is going to go up because it has to. And I think price is going to be more attractive. So as a bourbon consumer that has about 1,200 bottles at home, I'm excited, right?
Yeah.
But we'll see. I don't know. That's very self-serving, but like, that's kind of how I feel about it.
But also on the Scotch side, and Ollie Chilton, who is, elixir distillers and wears 100 hats and partly oversees a couple of distilleries and blah, blah, blah. He gave me into trouble from one of our previous podcasts where we were talking about the affordability of Scotch. And he was making the point, there's a ton of affordable Scotch out there. What draws headlines are the expensive special releases. Right. And so if we're consumer forward, we have to not lose sight of the fact that there is still affordable bourbon, there is still affordable Scotch, but are we talking about it?
I used to think about it back in the day of like when we would do whiskey innovation and launches, it would be is this product about volume of sales or volume of noise? Because those are two different objectives.
Very different things, yeah.
And they both are, you need both as a brand, right? You want to, if you're selling a Lalique Macallan for the price of a small island, right? That's about haloing back to classic Macau, right? Like that's about building the stature of the core and the flagship,
right.
Because that product, yes, might put someone's kid through college, but most special releases aren't putting your kid through college at the end of the day. Yeah. It's the everyday flagship bread and butter, right?
Absolutely.
Keeps the doors open.
It keeps the doors open.
Yeah.
So I think you can do both well and just be honest about the objectives, right?
Yeah, I think that's, and always in talking to you.
So your office is over this way?
We work out of here most days, yeah. And then just to give you guys, so future state, we would love to be able to build a bottling house over here in about 3 to 4 years, which means we literally need to start working on it yesterday. And then we've got enough land. If we stick with, we've built 24,000 barrel rick houses.
Yes.
We've
facing north to south.
We have, although we are already in the process of designing some experimental houses with music, but again, nice to have, not need. You got to earn those a little bit.
Music?
Music.
Using the construction. I was thinking you were going to be pounding bass, getting it to. No.
Nah, people have done that, so we wouldn't want to copy.
That's why I was curious.
But yeah, but I think it's a little bit. I always. Someone's like, what do you experimental, this and that? And I always say, like, you kind of got to earn your weird.
Yeah.
So I feel like we got to get the basics down first.
Makes sense.
And be producing really quality what we can do. And then you got to earn the permission to go do crazy stuff. So, so that'll come. Okay. Not fast enough for me, but it'll come. So yeah, we could fit, if we went standard, we could fit about 12 to 13 more rick houses on the current property we've got.
Wow. You made a point in the last interview that facing north, south, and east, west, you would lose some of your footprint going north, south.
Yeah.
And I've spent a year thinking about that comment.
It's how you have to berm them and how you have containment areas. So if you can just, hey man, how are you?
Good, how are you?
You staying warm?
Yeah.
Good. Well, I'll see you soon. Thanks, buddy.
Cheers. Good to meet you.
So it's essentially, if you could just speckle them where they fit, you can get more in the same footprint based on containment. But because we're putting them in specific areas and you have to have so much containment for each warehouse, you can't fit as many in. We're going to see, that was like an old timers thing. And it makes sense. There's so many things you hear from people who've been in the industry a million years. Spring whiskey's the best. And it makes sense because they used lake water and the lakes were turned over in the winter and it was cleaner and you didn't have algae bloom. In the distillery, you didn't have heating and cooling, so the distillery ran better because it wasn't so hot. They all make sense.
Yes.
But this is one, I guess,
I love the way you presented it in our last conversation because you said it's a bit of an old wives' tale, but we're thinking you're making construction decisions on an old wives' tale.
Because it makes sense. It makes total sense. But yeah, so it's cool. What else do you guys want? Let me see if they're done with this meeting. Oh. Hey, you want to say hi real quick? Sorry to interrupt. Hey, Nick. Hey, Robin. Come on in, guys. All right. Y'all don't mind. We're going to crash for just a second.
Hey,
how you doing?
Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's good to see you.
So, Joshua.
Just a little. There's some hot pockets in there, I tell you.
Yeah. No, those construction guys are pretty good about that.
They were just asking. This is the lady that can answer it best, actually. This is Robin. She's our civil engineer. She's awesome.
Jason. Nice to meet you, Robin.
Joshua,
So,
apologize for the cold
she and
hands.
Nick have laid out our entire kind of master plan from a civil engineering and kind of the land. It's not the easiest piece of land to work with. Donald was like, really? But they were just asking, we were talking about, originally we wanted all the warehouses to face north to south, and we still believe that. But like we've sacrificed land, and they were, why? And I was explaining like containment areas, and if you could but you can explain it better than me, I think.
Oh, there you go.
Can I just have you talk into that?
They're doing a podcast. I hope that's okay.
You're welcome to hold it. You just want to hold it by the edges.
Yeah,
Is
just
that
maybe.
okay? You're all right?
Yeah, sure.
There you go.
So as you can see, we're in rolling topography. So typically, if the owner doesn't mind which direction we face, we will align more with the contours of the land so that it creates less site work. So having to put all the warehouses in a north-south,
There we go.
in a north-south direction, then, we might run into more site work just to be able to orient that warehouse with the way that they like. So, like, Nick started looking at this, and he's like, can't we turn this way? And I'm like, no. This is the way they want it, so no. But I could save them, $10,000. I'm like, no. So that's
Okay,
because
because we were figuring that if you had a plot of land, obviously not all plots of land are square or rectangular,
right.
but it struck me that if you were north, south, or east, west, you were occupying a square or a rectangle.
Depends on if your property lines run north-south or east-west.
There you go. Therein lies the wrinkle. Okay.
They might be north-northeast or south-southwest, or
So if you go to other sites, they've kind of fit them in where they can to maximize square footage. But because we want them to face north to south, we're not able to like Tetris them in the same way, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know.
That's good.
Technical term.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised they let me in the meeting. But no, so these guys are brilliant and really. So when Robin's one of the first people we met with. And she came out and, we're like, let's build this pond into a lake. She's like, you guys are adorable. She's like, that's not going to hold any water.
It's never going to fill up.
We're like, we want the road to come here. And she's like, nope.
Is that why Denny's in this room having this meeting and Jane's showing us around?
Oh, yeah. This is absolutely planned. We're the worst
I
planners.
think they figured out how much a road costs.
Oh my God.
Yeah, we're like,
1.4 million is the entrance for us. That cul-de-sac works.
kick that can down the road.
Sincere thanks to Jane for showing us around today. Sorry we missed Denny.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, missing some.
Are you
Often his meeting.
I'm just kidding.
I'm very excited that now March 1 is committed as like your big date.
Maybe.
I wait on the follow-up for that, but best of luck going forward. Keep being honest, keep being yourselves, and we're excited to come back and see the next iteration of this.
Thanks, guys.
So thanks to you.
So great to see you all.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Happened.
Listen, guys, I have to apologize. I had Taco Bell before, and that noise, it's all me.
I can't believe we got however many minutes into this before we had a moment like that. Wow. Interviewing you in a construction site.
Well, yeah, we should have probably gone outside.